Well, meantime, the Biden administration advising Israel to hold off on that ground invasion into Gaza, saying it will allow more time for hostage negotiations and to get more aid to those in need. We do know, as Robert told us, several convoys of aid trucks have passed through the Rafah crossing from Egypt over the weekend, carrying the food and medical supplies, but as of right now, no fuel. Israel's pending invasion into Gaza is raising fears of the war spreading beyond its borders, including targeting U.S. forces deployed in the Mideast. Joining us now, retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. General, thank you so much for speaking with us again. Obviously, there's this news potentially of more hostages being released. You know, last week I spoke with you. This ground invasion seemed imminent. Now there's this increased pressure to delay it. How likely is it that a full-scale invasion does not happen?
Nichole, Israel is juggling a variety of objectives. Number one, they have the right and the responsibility to strike against Hamas to defend themselves, but they also have extreme interest in making sure that they can rescue as many hostages as possible. And the U.S. and Israel and others have a very strong interest in deterring other action in the region. And so as Israel considers whether they perform a full-scale invasion or not, they're juggling those other factors in their consideration.
So many things to consider here. And again, we're waiting to hear from the White House. We're waiting to hear from the State Department on whether or not more hostages are being released. But is there a point where the still missing and captive hostages are not a factor in determining how to proceed?
Nichole, those hostages are going to always be a factor. And whether that's guiding the types of strikes that Israel takes or the types of raids that we've even heard about in the last couple of days, that Israel does indeed desire and have shown over the course of history a strong intent to find those hostages that are taken. And ultimately, I believe, and others believe as well, that they're going to continue to keep that high on their priority list.
You know, in general, we keep talking about, you know, this pending ground invasion. You know, we haven't seen the full-scale invasion yet, but that doesn't mean things aren't happening. Talk to us about the impact of these limited raids, these limited airstrikes that are happening, and talk about this Iron Sting mortar bomb.
Nichole, I think it's important to realize that Israel now has given those civilians in the northern part of Gaza 16 days to evacuate to the south. That actually is indicative of the fact that Israel cares far more about the Palestinian people than Hamas does. And as they juggle those considerations that I described earlier, they're going to consider all of those as factors, and they're going to find the best way via strikes and raids and consideration of a full-scale assault to achieve those objectives.
And that is a good point. You know, 16 days to evacuate. General, so many things complicate this, including, of course, neither side fully knows what to expect from the other. Obviously, that can be the case in any war, but is it more pronounced in this situation?
Nichole, I think it's very clear that as we see this unfold over the last 16 days and into the future, that indeed it's a tumultuous situation, not only with what's going on there in Gaza and with Hamas, but also those other areas within the Middle East that we've seen maps of strikes that have been undertaken by Iranian-supported elements within Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. And certainly there is a lot of uncertainty here. And the one thing that I know is that all of it was started by a brutal attack on Israel, and Israel now figuring out the best way to achieve their objectives as they, again, care far more for the Palestinian people than Hamas does by putting them at risk.
And before I let you go, General, I just want to ask you about the aid that's going in. We know that food, medical supplies are starting to go in. Still no fuel. Obviously, there was a reason for that. Do you think we will see fuel brought in there to Gaza?
Nichole, just in the last couple of days that we've shown the proof of concept that we can deliver aid into Gaza. But I also think Israel continues to rightfully be concerned that that aid will be diverted to support Hamas. That's happened since 2007, and Israel is going to continue to weigh that as a factor in their allowance of aid to flow through into Gaza.
Excellent insight there. Great speaking with you as always, Brigadier General John Teichert. We certainly appreciate your expertise. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.